What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy Royale. Today, we are talking through another full team breakdown. We're talking through the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to look at their 2023. We're going to look at, what they project moving forward, from fantasy projections to looking at their depth chart, what our outlook is for their entire season. And we're going to get started with talking about the 2023 season, because obviously it was a little bit different. Without Joe Burrow experienced another season-ending injury. They went 9-8. Offense kind of kept pace, though. They did a good job in making sure that they could stay afloat, win some games. 16th in points per game, 20th in points per game on defense. But they did lose their offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan. He is now the Tennessee Titans head coach. They traded Joe Mixon. I think that was calculated in a way to kind of get around some cap issues, pay Zach Moss instead. We'll talk about that. But contract issues persist. This T. Higgins thing is kind of looming large over their heads. Jamar Chase is due for a new deal. And so this is kind of like the last hurrah. Do you agree with that kind of analysis of where they are mentally?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a bit of they retooled a few things and they're going all in with the wide receiver core that they have right now. It doesn't seem like they're interested in trading T this offseason. I mean, if they're a 500 team or below at the deadline, maybe they'd consider it. But other than that, I don't see him going anywhere this year. They're going to pay Jamar Chase next year the same amount that Jefferson's getting. So they need to maximize the talent pool at wide receiver this year and try and figure it out again next year.
Yeah, and I think one thing they've done is they've kind of set themselves up to lose T. Higgins in the last two drafts. So really some of their notable roster moves this year, they did lose Tyler Boyd. That's a big one. They lost Joe Mixon. But they added Zach Moss, Logan Woodside, Mike Gesicki, Trent Brown, Sheldon Rankins, Von Bell, Geno Stone. And then they drafted Amarius Mims, Chris Jenkins, and Jermaine Burton in the first three rounds. Jermaine Burton being that one guy that I think they're looking toward the future with their eyes set on potentially having just one of Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. It's clearly going to be Jamar Chase, just based on how that has gone. But then, they also lost Jonah Williams. They also lost DJ Reader. They also lost Nick Scott, Joby Uzier. Like, this team has kind of lost quite a bit on specifically the defensive side of the ball. What are your thoughts on their roster moves? Did you like going from Mixon to Zach Moss? Do you think that's a method that can work for them?
I think it can. We saw Zach Moss, explode a little bit last year. It wasn't sustained throughout the whole season. Once Jonathan Taylor's back, it was best with both of them working in together. I think they saw enough from Chase Brown last year to really full send this move and just try and figure out the money wise to bring in Trent Brown to help that side, bring in a whole new safety tandem. I think that was part of the move with Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd. It felt like held out forever to finally sign with his old OC in Tennessee. It seemed like they were trying to figure out how the money would work in Cincinnati and just wasn't. So that was a big issue. And then obviously DJ Reader, losing him is huge, but I think they did an admirable job of bringing in replacement level veterans and then also bringing in a talented rookie to take over that position. So a lot of good things, and I think Zach Moss and Chase Brown should be at least what Joe Mixon was the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also like adding the safety tandem. We're going to talk through the depth chart, so I don't want to go too in depth on that.
Yeah.
But I do think Moss is serviceable. I think Moss and Chase Brown complement each other really well. Like, Moss is your grinded out. You're going to give him the carries between the tackles. I think you're going to get Chase Brown in space. And because you now have two guys that are kind of doing what they were paying Joe Mixon to do all at once, I think they're in better shape, because then you're going to have a healthier backfield. I think you're going to have more options for Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow does get a little banged up, you now have a way to kind of get through the season with some efficiency, at least. Let's talk through the projected offense, because I do have some problems with this offensive roster. Their offensive line, Cordell Volson is going to start at left guard. Alex Kappa is going to start at right guard because they're paying him to. But really, like, this is not the most ideal situation. Kappa hasn't really been good the last couple of years. He was a high paid free agent, and he's kind of underperformed that contract. Trent Brown and Amarius Mims kind of competing at right tackle. I think Trent Brown is the leader because of just his experience, and Amarius Mims is a kid that needs to take some time. But also Trent Brown has been bad. We've talked about that multiple times this offseason. So I know you're getting big bodies to make sure you keep Joe Burrow clean, but I don't necessarily know that Trent Brown is a significant upgrade from what they had last year at right tackle. The slot receiver right now is Trenton Irwin. I think Jermaine Burton's going to work into the slot. That Jamar Chase was used in the slot quite a bit last year too. So I think they'll be able to move those pieces around. Your tight ends are kind of looking – their tight end room hasn't really been good in the whole Joe Burrow era. So I'm not really too concerned about that. But what are you thinking about this roster right now?
Yeah, I think they've been continually reshaping the offensive line, trying to figure out what's going to work. Orlando Brown, has been great, but then also has been bad at left tackle. Jackson Carman has played inside and outside, really hasn't stuck anywhere. Volson, nothing great there, except Cody Ford. Kappa, like you said, up and down play. I think Jackson Kirkland is a good, young guy that could possibly take over, but right now he's a swing offensive lineman. And yeah, Trent Brown and Mims together, I think, are worse than Jonah Williams going into this year. But going into next year, I think Mims should be better. That's where they're planning on. They're going to have Trent Brown start. When he's hurt 4 weeks in, Mims will get some game time. Brown will come back. Mims will go back to the bench and be the swing tackle. And we're just going to keep doing that for the year until Mims at least beats him out in that regard. But there's so much he has to learn. He's very limited game time. So being behind someone like Trent Brown is perfect for him. And then, yeah, wide receiver-wise, like you said, they're going to put 3 receivers on the field, the best 3. Last year, Trent Irwin was part of that rotation. So I think he has earned his slot spot. Now, is he going to be on the field when Chase is in the slot? No. Burton will be on the field then, and that's kind of where he's going to work in, and then eventually Burton might be able to take that over, or if they end up trading T because Burton does so well in camp and everything. I don't see that happening. I just think they're going to ride this last year out with T and understand the bridge is burned. We're not bringing you back. We'll move on. You'll move on, but you're staying here for a year. So that's what we're doing. And they haven't valued the tight end position in the last 5 years. I know it's a new OC, but I don't see that changing. That's why they brought in Mike Gesicki to possibly catch 2 touchdowns. It's nothing exciting. Eric All, I think, has a lot of upside. I think that might be a step in the right direction. I just don't see him taking over the position this year.
I'm with you there. I do think that he'll get some run down the stretch. He's an older prospect, so I think provided that he's healthy, I think he could be their best tight end by the end of the year. Depending on what his development looks like, that is still a difficult position to kind of get accustomed to. I did want to mention before we move over to the defense, Dan Pitchers, their new offensive coordinator. He was their quarterbacks coach last year, so this offense is largely going to be the same. I think maybe the play calling changes a little bit, but quite frankly, I think that this is just going to be a carbon copy of what we've seen. I think maybe you incorporate a little bit more with the running backs, like I mentioned, but outside of that, this is going to be a very, very similar offense. So I don't think too many folks should be worried about, new OC, is Joe Burrow going to be less efficient? Is Jamar Chase going to be less efficient? I don't think that's going to be the case this year, personally.
Yeah, I think that it'll be a very slightly more balanced attack is the big thing. And that's, again, the line has to be improved for that to work. So,
yeah.
And this team always starts out slow as well. It's mainly because Joe Burrow's never had a training camp. So we'll see. He's seemingly working in and out of the training camps this year, coming back from a very significant injury. So we'll see if that slow start continues.
Yeah. Okay. Projected defense. So we've got Sam Hubbard, Sheldon Rankins, BJ Hill, Trey Hendrickson. That's a good solid 4. You've got Cam Sample, Joseph Osai, Miles Murphy, Cedric Johnson kind of working all in. You've got Chris Jenkins that you just drafted. You got Jay Tufele as well. You've got a really good front 7 there because then you include Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither is kind of in the mix as well. I think they're going to run a lot of nickel stuff. I think you're always going to see a slot corner, especially it gets a little difficult in this division. And I think it got a little more difficult with Arthur Smith coming to Pittsburgh. But a lot of teams are still trotting out 11 personnel with 3 receivers. So the linebacker has been a little bit undervalued because they have Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson, who have been so good. Not a lot of depth there, I wouldn't say. And then the corner room, I think they got the 2 safeties, which I really like those moves. I think they got the 2 safeties because the depth at corner is just a question mark right now. Cam Taylor-Britt has been up and down. He's been good and bad. DJ Turner has kind of been moved all over the defense. So I think we're going to see if he takes a step up as an outside corner. That's how they're projecting him this year, is to be that starting CB2 with Mike Hilton in the slot. I don't know how to feel about this defense. I like the depth up front, but I think if you have 1 or 2 injuries in that secondary, I think this could get kind of ugly.
Yeah, I think they've built a nickel defense in a conference or a division, I should say, that doesn't, lend itself to that. I mean, DJ Turner, Dax Hill are some of the most ultimate move pieces. Both are really good in the slot. DJ Turner showed a lot of better things on the outside last year, so good for them. But they have Mike Hilton to be the slot guy, so now Dax Hill is a rotational safety, rotational corner. Drafted very highly, seems like a bit of a waste, but there's some things there. Josh Newton drafted 5th round, relatively high. McKinley Jackson to hopefully take over from DJ Hill if Zach Carter isn't good. 3rd round pick, that's pretty solid as well. Another guy that we liked a little bit rotationally. I think they have a strong front followed by 2 really good linebackers, and then when Davis Gaither is your only rotational linebacker, that's not great. And yeah, the corners, there's nothing standing out to me, but I think they can all play. And that's the same with the safety duo, where they're all being moved on from different teams for different reasons. So we'll see how they pair up here. But I wouldn't even say this is as good a defense as if they've had the last couple of years, even though they got more defensive line and edge depth.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we don't, but I think a lot of folks undervalue Chidobe Awuzie's impact on this defense. I think he was really good in that scheme. I do want to mention Dax Hill's probably going to play some corner too. I think he's going to rotate in. I think he'll, get some snaps on the outside. He's that move piece that they've got as well. So I'm curious to see how this shakes out. I think it can be a good unit, but I think you're really relying on health on both sides of the ball. This team is not very deep. I do think that their starting 11 on both sides is good though. I think, I think this can be a productive defense against some of the NFL's best offenses, just depending on does Sam Hubbard, continue his good play? Does Trey Hendrickson continue being one of the better edge rushers, most underrated edge rushers in the game? I think if those 2 things happen, I think this defense could overperform maybe based on our view of their depth. Let's talk about their schedule, because we talked about them being slow starters, but they get the easiest first 4 probably of any team in the NFL. You've got Patriots to start, not a good team right now. Kansas City's tough, but then Washington, Carolina gets you through. You should be 3-1 coming out of that. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah.
Then you've got Baltimore, New York, Cleveland, Philadelphia. If you guys are watching, you see the screen. I'm not going to read every game, but really this schedule is it's very roller coastery. I think that there are winnable games in between really difficult games. They're really the toughest stretch, I would say, is just that at Cleveland, home against Philadelphia stretch, 7 and 8. Outside of that, I think this schedule lends itself to another winning season for the Bengals.
Yeah, I think that week 7 to week 10 is really their hard stretch, just because, we say it every time, but NFC North, 3-3, split every game, and for the division, move on. We'll see if there's always going to be one time every 5 years that someone changes that, but it's usually that, especially with how good everyone in this division is. So you'd think, hopefully, you're 3-1, maybe even 4-0. The Bengals have been historically good against the Chiefs, but you could be 2-2 going into that first Ravens game. You could easily, I think you could easily slip up against the Commanders. Just simply, Jane Daniels performing well. We saw it last year early with the Colts, where the dominant running rookie quarterback was able to just will his team into the wins, even if he was on and off the field. which I'm hoping that's not the case with Jaden, but we'll see. And then Ravens are always going to be impossibly hard, and we'll see how it goes. And then that stretch there where the Raiders, they're a 500 team that's hit or miss, and they might come out swinging. Your offensive line's not great. The defensive line for the Raiders got better. We'll see how that works. Then, thankfully you get the Chargers, which will be a grind-out game that doesn't match up well with your defense going into the bye. And then you face some easy teams in that time frame too. So you're going to have to play really well the whole season. You have the 6th easiest strength of schedule on paper. But again, it's so roller coaster. You have to take that momentum when you get it and really hit over that mark. I have them 11-6 and the 2 seed, beating the current over/under of 10.5.
I have them at 11-6 as well, except they are my 5 seed. I have them losing the division to the Ravens. We already did that Ravens video, so go check that out if you're so inclined. But I have them as the top wild card team. I have them hitting the over as well. Just this strength of schedule. If Joe Burrow stays healthy, I find it very difficult to believe that this is going to be a bad football team. That does matter, and I think that would be my one question for them. Are they going to be able to get the same production out of a backup quarterback that they did with Jake Browning last year? We'll see. Hopefully we don't have to see.
Yeah. It's Jake Browning again, so you'd hope you could.
You think, but like we've seen the backup quarterback come in, he's good. He goes back out there again, and it's not as good. And with the new offense, we'll see if that would sustain. But hopefully, we don't see, because I just want to see Joe Burrow play football. I want him to stay healthy. So
and Chase and Hickett, we've never. I know we kind of have, but it feels like we've never truly gotten that full year of all of them just together. And if it's the last hurrah, I would like to see it, even if they are a division rival.
The one year we got that, they were in the Super Bowl. Exactly. And they should have won the Super Bowl, if not for Matt Stafford masterclass. I believe
Higgins and Chase missed a game or two, and I think Burrow did too. So it was like...
Yeah, I'd like to see them healthy. I think if we do, this is a winning football team that is a legitimate AFC contender. And with that said,
there's a lot of them.
Yes, there are. All right, projections-wise, I've got Joe Burrow at QE9, 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, taking care of the football. I've actually got Chase Brown outscoring Zach Moss, RB29, if only because I think he's the primary pass-catching back. You'll see here I do have Zach Moss outpacing him on the ground. I do think this is going to be a bit of a split backfield, but I think Chase Brown is a really, really fantastic value in fantasy right now because of the pass catching upside, the explosiveness, the efficiency that we saw at times last year with him. Jamar Chase, wide receiver 6, another similar season to last year. T. Higgins, wide receiver 20. This is assuming that he stays healthy, but I think that we can have 2 over 1,100-yard receivers between the two of them, as we should every single year they're healthy. And then I don't have a tight end being at any level of impact, so I put Jermaine Burton on the graphic. I do think that as the season wears down, I think he becomes their wide receiver 3, but it's not really impactful for fantasy. So wide receiver 96 there. What stands out here? Do you think I'm a little too rich on the running backs? Do you think I'm
no?
Okay.
I don't. I think both of them are going to be. You're going to be happy if you get an RB2 out of either of them. Zach Moss, 9 touchdowns, 10 in total. I think that's pretty fair. I think people are the RB29 for Chase. I think people balk at a bit. I do think he probably gets a little bit less carries than 131, just how you would assume it. But if they're viewing Chase Brown as their true weapon out of the backfield, then this is what he's going to be. 40 catches, 120 plus, 115 plus carries, and if you can get 8 touchdowns, I think that's that's a positive touchdown season, I guess is the better word for it. I don't think that's more of an average of what his career will be, but that's going to happen some years. So I think because I think he had maybe 1 or 2 on the ground last year, but he had more through the air, and I think it's something similar. These are all big. These aren't necessarily huge breakaway plays, but they're not at the goal line. All of these touchdowns.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see. I think this offense can be explosive. That's the main thing from this group. I think we've got a lot of fantasy performers. This is an offense that I want a piece of. And like Chase Brown to me is going to be one of those like let's get on DraftKings on Saturday night. Ooh, Chase Brown's pretty affordable. Do I think he's scoring a touchdown today? Do I think he's scoring six or catching six balls? He's probably not scoring six touchdowns, but he might catch six balls in a game. So that's kind of one of those plays. But yeah, to me, uh, the problem is Jamar Chase's ADP is a little bit higher than that as of right now. So maybe I won't have a whole lot
Yeah.
of Chase, but really I'd be willing to reach a little bit over that to get Chase on my fantasy team. So
Yeah, and I mean, we're what, 30, 40, 43 touchdowns through the air and through the ground just on the graphic.
mhm.
Uh, I think some people will probably expect Joe to get more than 30 as well. So there's a little bit of an uptick. People will be chasing the wide receiver 3, and that's why I think it's very key to put Burton here, because to me this shows, as I said earlier, Irwin earned targets last year. So
Mhm.
he's going to be on the field, and Burton will be rotating in as the wide receiver 4. And then maybe near the end, second half of the year, he can get a little bit more production. But that basically tells me you do not want a wide receiver 3. You only want the top 4 on this graphic in total for this whole team.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, that's how we feel about the Bengals. We think they're legit contenders. If things shake out the right way, I think that they can go to a Super Bowl. It obviously depends on how they play down the stretch, and the schedule lends itself to carrying some momentum into the playoffs. Hopefully, so hopefully everyone stays healthy. That's the main thing. There's not a lot of depth on this team, but the starting lineup looks really, really good on paper, and this is a team that I want on my fantasy team. So let us know what you think. Drop a little comment here. And let us know what you think of the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll be back with another one of these soon. Thank you guys for watching.